you know what I'm saying? It's like languages. You have to take a leap of faith as well because they're all subjective.
To some okay, so that's a good argument. But what
I've even heard the word Elohim. You know, Elohim. Is that an Arabic word?
No, that's actually Hebrew.
It's Hebrew.
It's Hebrew. That's found in the Old Testament.
And what is your word for
Allah?
Allah.
So Allah, Elohim, or Eli, all found, in Semitic languages.
And what is the plural?
There is no plural for Allah. There is a plural for Elo, which is Elohim. Interesting.
What was the one?
Eli, Ilah.
That's not.
No, we don't find that. It's Aramaic. It's beautiful because Semitic languages, they have like close ties, right? But with Hebrew, you have Elohim. Allah is genderless. There's no pluralism.
One time I was like, I thought that was plural, and I was thinking, what if there is something, that out of many on earth.
Right. Well, the word Allah is very unique in that sense. It's, Allah is genderless. There's no pluralism. It's more just a singular one God, which is interesting because it entails a one true God, the monotheistic view. But just kind of going back to what you're saying, written language and whatnot and writings is subjective, similar to Darwinism and the Darwinian theory, neo-Darwinism and whatnot. Yes and no. I would say that there has to be one objective truth, and I think that's something we can agree on, right? Ultimately, there has to be one objective truth. Well, that's the thing, is we have to assess, we have to have a certain criteria and assess it. Whereas everything else is subjective. Whether it's, so for example, the Christian subjectively believes that Jesus is God. The Hindu believes subjectively that they should worship certain animals and idols and statues, okay? Everything can be looked at subjective until made objective. So how do you make something objective? How do you seek objective truth? By assessing things in a very, very thorough criteria through certain rationality dispositions. So for example, I'll give you the Quranic argument. The Quranic argument as to why it is the true word of God is based, so for any word of God, let's put a criteria. For any book to be divine, the word of God, and not be subjective, it has to have the following criteria. I don't mean to take much of your time. I've spent a few more minutes. It can't be a word that's unchanged. It has to be a preserved tablet or a preserved book. It cannot be unchanged. That's the first thing. The second thing is...
A book that cannot be unchanged.
Yeah, it can't be unchanged. It has to be preserved. So from the time that it was revealed, it has to remain the same, right? It has to be preserved. Whether it's written or orally preserved, it has to remain the same.
No evolution. The word can
no alterations, no forgeries, no tampering. It has to just be as it is. The second criteria is that it can't have any contradictions, right? Because obviously if you have contradictions, then...
But you're saying this about the Quran?
No, I'm saying on any criteria. This is what we have to take and assess.
Text.
Yeah.
For any
religious text.
We've already lost.
Well, I was about to say,
let's Crusaders.
So let's put a few books to the test.
And killing in the Middle East.
So let's put a few books to the test.
What?
Let's put the criteria first, and we'll test the books.
All of them were murderers.
Okay,
murderers and thieves.
Let's put it to the test.
So every text is finished.
Well, you're talking about the third criteria, which I didn't get to yet. It has to have moral, upright teachings, right? That's what you were trying to relay. It has to have morality. Absolutely. So let's go through it again.
But all of them say morality. I've dabbled.
So that also gets into objective morality versus subjective morality, right? Then we can get into that. It's a very interesting topic. I love the topic. But all right, so the criteria is set for validating a book of God is the following. It can't be unchanged. It can't have any contradictions. It has to be moral upright. It has to have moral teachings. And finally, it has to be given to a person who was deemed as a prophet of God, who is not some kind of madman. It has to be an authentic person, obviously. The person given had to have been an authentic person. So let's go through it. If you put the Bible, interesting.
What about the Marx and Lenin?
Okay, interesting. Let's talk about the Bible real quick. From the Old and New Testament point of view, has the Bible been changed?
Yes.
It has been changed. I would agree with you on that. Would you agree?
Absolutely.
Would you agree?
Yeah.
The Bible has been changed. Why? Because we know it to be changed. Absolutely. You compare simple things. John 7:53 to 8:11. Those texts are taken out. You find them in the King James. It's not in the NIV. You have terms like in John 3:16, which Christians love to use. The term begotten was taken out. So obviously it has been tampered. It's been forged. Bart Ehrman, Dr. James White, many other great scholars.
Just to cut to this.
Okay, so let's. The Bible's been changed. So therefore, we already deem it as not the Word of God. We go to the Old Testament, we have the same problem. There's changes, there's variants. Textual variance is a big problem in the OT, in the Old Testament. We go to the Quran. From the Quranic point of view, it hasn't been changed. How do we know it hasn't been changed? And I'm making a claim, right? If I have to make a claim, I have to back it up. The Quran hasn't been changed because it's been orally preserved for 1400 years. It's not based on a written transmission as opposed to all the other scriptures. Now, what does oral preservation entail? interestingly, the Quran itself says that we have revealed this book and we shall preserve it. So first of all, the Quran claims to be a preserved book. Now, 1400 years ago, it was revealed. When it was orally recited, it was recited in a arithmetic manner. I don't know if you ever heard the Quran itself. Have you ever heard the Quran being recited? If you ever did, it's arithmetic. And we know the psychological disposition of any human is to memorize something is through rhythm. Now, if you carry that tradition on, that oral transmission that was given from Angel Gabriel being, the mediator, the median between God, given to Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, carrying it over now to his companions, orally recited, orally memorized. Let's say the Prophet Muhammad taught it to 10 people. Those 10 people taught it each to 10 other people. And that tradition carried on up to today. We see today there's over 10 million, according to Google. You can go to Dr. Google himself, and he'll tell you that there are over 10 million Muslims worldwide who have the Quran memorized as little or as minimum at the age of what? Perhaps six, 5. So why is it that 6-year-olds and 5-year-olds have the entire Quran memorized? Do you know anyone?
But aren't words? You said it's unchanged, but aren't words words change?
Well,
the words, archaic words become new. They evolve. People evolve. The imams evolve.
Okay, so I'm talking about the book itself, right?
Well, I mean, then if you're talking about all the texts,
so now you're talking about the people,
they're
right?
unchanged from the basis of what they are.
Yeah. Now you're talking about
at one time written, so everything is unchanged. It was the people, like he was saying, they're impure, or they're.
Okay, so you're more concerned with the people, right? Like how they end up, they're following.
The people are all corruptible. They're all murderers and thieves.
Okay, so let me.
Would you agree everyone here on this earth is a murderer and a thief?
Everyone?
Yes.
I think that's a very powerful statement.
It is.
Why?
We're
are you talking about like as simple as eating,
We're dirty animals.
As simple as eating animals and things like that?
We're dirty monkeys, guys. Would you agree with that statement?
That's an interesting statement. Are you vegan?
What?
Are you vegan?
I am.
Okay. Yeah, he's coming from vegan. I can appreciate that, by the way. And by the way, you could be a Muslim and vegan at the same time.
Oh yeah?
Oh yeah, absolutely. You agree?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we can eat vegetables.
Oh, yes, yep.
And I know Muslim friends who actually, they're really religious vegans. And there's no issue with that.
No, but I'm just saying, I'm arguing with, you say something is unchanged, but I'm like, with all the people that are.
So let me tell you something. This is called.
Priests, to all these people.
I love this point. By the way, brother, I didn't get your name.
Giovanni.
Giovanni.
Yes.
Love that name. My name is Mustafa. You can just call me Mo for short. I'll tell you this, okay?
Yeah.
The interesting thing is this is called the genetic fallacy. I don't know if you ever studied philosophy.
Genetic?
Genetic fallacy is to judge a religion via its people. Now what you're doing essentially is you're conflating.
Great people. I told him I went to Morocco, Egypt.
Oh, you've been to? Okay,
yeah.
So I'm part Egyptian myself, actually.
Oh,
yeah.
Very good.
God bless you. Let me tell you this. What we're doing here is, from your point of view, is you're conflating Islam the religion versus Muslim the people, right? Because you can have.
No.
Yeah.
All people. Christians.
Okay, so you're
Buddhists,
talking
everybody.
Universally.
Everybody is changed. Everybody
Universally, all people have changed. Okay, but this is the belief: is if you follow Islam in a holistic point of view for everything that it says, you'll be guided. How do we know that? Because everyone has an instruction manual. Everything rather has an instruction manual and a purpose. You take out your phone, my phone, it has a purpose,
but
right?
You're using that as your argument for that's the true religion.
But what I'm saying is,
you follow the people.
No, not at all. Actually, if we were to
doing everything great and they're
no, I don't. I would never say that. If you were to follow,
if you were, is that
well, if you were to follow, not necessarily, because if you were to follow people,
because I know there are great people. I know there's great people.
I would never say that. I wouldn't say because the people are good, therefore the religion. I wouldn't say because the people are good, therefore the religion is valid and authentic. I wouldn't say that, because you can have a religion that has excellent teachings. It could be morally upright in terms of its religious teachings, but the people are complete lunatics, terrorists, and whatnot, right? And in fact, this is the problem in Islam, right? Is you have a black sheep, a bad apple community in the Muslim community, such as if you want to call them ISIS, whatnot, extremists who have hijacked the religious teachings of Islam, manipulated it, pictured it, depicted it in a way that the mass now thinks Islam is like this horrible, evil thing. But then when you go into
people with small minds,
right. But God has blessed you with a kind of an open mindset, as I see. Your disposition is very beautiful. But let me tell you this: when you go back to the Quran now, what do you see? In chapter 5, verse 32, it says that if you kill one soul, it's as if you've killed all of humanity. So why are people ignoring such verses? Why are people ignoring verses that say do not kill yourself? Suicide by bombing is against Islam. It says وَلَا تَقْتُلُوا أَنفُسَكُمْ, right? Which means do not kill yourself. So it's completely forbidden for someone to just strap a bomb on himself and go and blow people up. All of this is completely against the teachings of Islam, and that's the point. Is Islam as a religion promotes peace and it promotes justice. Yes, there is this whole rulings on warfare and whatnot when you're engaged in like war. Of course, every system has that, right? Whether it's democracy, whether, you name the system out there, Christianity, the Crusaders, as you mentioned before. But when you look at Islam, overall, it provides a very unique guideline. And the beautiful thing about Islam is that it's not a new religion. And this is what many people don't understand and don't realize. Islam is simply a way of life. When you define the word Islam, by the way, do you know what the word Muslim means?
Submission.
Beautiful. So yes, Islam means submission, and Muslim means one who submits to God. And we believe that ultimately there's one way of life, and that's to submit to God. You're created, we're designed, we have complexities, we're fine-tuned, we're obviously a machine. And so we have to have some kind of designer, creator. When you see laws, it basically entails a lawmaker, right? A decision maker. And so from that point of view, as a Muslim...
So last
yeah,
question,
sure.
I'll leave you.
Yeah. No, I'm here. I'm happy to stay for the next hour.
Is there like a endpoint to, when you go out and speak to people, is there, or to other Muslims, do you desire a pope, if you will, a top imam that interprets?
Do we look up to some specific authority? You mean?
Do you think that would be a point of the Sunnis, all of Islam coming together and being?
I think what you're trying to say is.
You know what I'm saying? There's so much strife between the Sunnis and the Shias. Yeah. Do you see like a point where
we can kind of collaborate as one?
Exactly.
Well, it's interesting because here's the thing again about kind of what people conflate. They look at the Muslim people, and then they look at Muslim, the religion, right? Mm-hmm. So when you look at Muslim, the people, you're going to see Shia, Sunni, Sufi, fighting. All these different people clashing, different cults, right? As you call them. But from the Muslim point of view, what does the Quran say? The Quran says, and do not divide, and do not divide in sects. Mm-hmm. So the Quran teaches, God has taught us, don't divide. Just be that one religion that, has been decreed for you, which is submitting to God. And therefore, I think the one thing that we need to understand is Islam is not kind of like this cult, but it's more so a way of life. And if you follow it, then what we believe is you're guided. And how are you guided? Because you're following the natural disposition that we're born in. So we believe that everyone is born as a Muslim. Mm-hmm. We're all born to submit to God. When we're born in an innate disposition where what do? We submit to everything that surrounds us, whether it's the baby who wants to suckle, right? Whether it's the baby that cries for help, automatically it's submission, right? And it's how we're raised that we end up either falling into godlessness, or we end up perhaps worshiping a man, i.e. Jesus, or we end up worshiping the creation, which is an idol, or perhaps something else. But what we need to understand is God transcends all this. There has to be a designer, and we are the design. We are the product of the designer. And so if we can kind of come to common terms on this matter, then that would make you a Muslim too, my friend. From that point of view, you'd be someone who submits to God. Does that make sense to you?
It makes sense to me, but one last question.
Sure.
When the French published these the images of Muhammad, did you find that offensive?
So that is offensive if you want to do that to any prophet of God, not just Muhammad, right? Mm-hmm. And only because these are righteous people, but we wouldn't go to the level of going and murdering people because of it. What we do is we speak. The greatest sword that we have, I believe, is the intellect. This is to speak to people rationally, and the Quran tells us to do this. It tells us in chapter 16, verse 125, it says, call people to the way of your Lord. With what? With wisdom and beautiful preaching. And it says, reason with them. It doesn't say go and, kill all these people that don't agree with you. Absolutely not. There's nowhere in the Quran. This is why it's very important for us to look at the source of Islam and what it teaches, and not necessarily what's out there, because it's all Chinese whispers, if you call it, right? So God bless you, man. Is this something that you do? So, do you believe in God yourself? Or a higher being, if you want to call it?
Maybe something like that.
Okay.
But I was telling him I believe the wisdom of uncertainty is my favorite way to go through life. Wisdom of uncertainty.
Interesting. And that's a very humble position, right?
Right. Yeah.
But would you agree that there is an objective truth out there?
An objective truth. I think everyone's looking for it.
Yeah, but you agree it's out there.
I don't think we found it because obviously.
Yeah. Well, you believe the universe was obviously designed by something, right, or by some entity.
I don't know. I don't know if we can make that claim.
So there's only
we've science has discovered that we used to be we used to think that the sun went around the earth.
Right.
Now we know.
Well, yeah, that's interesting. We were talking about that.
We used to say it was a universe. Now it's the multiverse.
Multiverse theory.
That
we were talking about that in the beginning of our conversation, weren't we? We were talking about Darwinism and how see, that applies to Darwinism too, is science changes. And you're right.
And I've heard of a lot of, I think Sarah Palin was saying, denied that, she's a Christian or something. She denied the dinosaurs. And I was like, it's just like, where does...
100 years from now, 100 years back, we used to believe in a steady state model. And in fact, Einstein included it in his theory of relativity. Mm-hmm. But now today, what do we have? We have more so of a Big Bang model. People accept that more, interestingly. But back then, people really held tight to steady state and they believed it to be true. But now that we have something that's more scientifically valid, you can say, people hold on more to the Big Bang. And that just shows you the nature of science. Darwinism is hot right now, but perhaps some years down, something else might come about. And that's just the beautiful nature of science. So that's what I was saying earlier, is we have to have scientific humility. But from the universe itself, we have something a little bit more solid, because the universe either came from nothing, it created itself, it was created by something else that was created, or it was created by something or some entity that was uncreated. I don't know if you got all those 4 criteria.
Yeah.
So if you assess all this,
blows your mind.
Obviously it couldn't come from nothing, because you need something to give you something, right? So we reject that. The second is it couldn't have created itself, because you would have to pre-exist and post-exist in order to do that, and that's impossible. That's like your mother giving birth to herself, which is inevitably a logical impossibility. The third is that the universe was created by something else that was created. And we can kind of, look in, if you investigate that, okay, fine, universe A created universe B. Well, what created universe B? The only thing you can say is universe C, universe D. So you fall into the absurdity of the infinite regression, of infinity. The only thing that
says what?
The Quran says the final one, which is that the final of the 4 criteria that I set, which is that the universe was created from an entity that's uncreated. An uncreated entity, meaning that entity was not created, because that entity transcends us. He wasn't born, she wasn't born, whatever you want to call. We don't have he, she for God, right? So we just say God, we just say Allah. That's why Allah wasn't born. He's the first and the last. So he doesn't have, if you want to call it, an initiation point, because he's not bound by time or space. You understand? God he transcends time and space. And that's what distinguishes us and God. And we are limited in our knowledge capacity, but we can derive certain rational conclusions just by looking at this criteria. And it makes most sense that the universe was created by a higher being. And we believe the higher being to be God. He gave us a reason, a purpose of life. It's not guaranteed you and I will live in the next 5 minutes. It's not. And once we die, the belief is that that's it. Everything will be shown in front of you. You'll be told that this is your destination. This is how you lived your life. There is a hereafter. We do believe in a hereafter. And ultimately, we all will come to find what that objective truth is. But I would argue that if you looked into something called Pascal's wager, Pascal said that it's better for you to live your life believing in God than not believing in God. Why? Because if you live your life believing in God, you don't miss out on much. You're going to lose finite things. You'll lose maybe, you have to obey God's laws on certain things. So you'll lose some finite things. You stay away from the bad, evil things that God says. But whereas if you now deny God, live life denying God, and now you die, you're in the grave, and you come to realize that there is a God. So now you lost perhaps infinity, because every religious, worldview holds that there's an infinite, life after this one. And so it's better to live your life believing in God. And so how do you believe in God? You worship God, you submit to God. The only religion that tells you to submit to the one true God is Islam. And Islam is the religion. We believe in Islam. I'll leave you with this point, because I really don't want to take much more of your time.
No, nice talking to you, brother.
So Islam is the one straight path we believe in. I would humbly suggest, to look into it more. Do you want me to give you some?
No, I have.
You got that?
I actually have the Quran at home. I tried to read, but,
Okay, so you have a copy of the Quran.
Bible, so.
Okay, well, let me, you have a copy of the Quran, you said already, right?
I do, yes.
Beautiful. So read on. We're here every Saturday and Sunday. We can have a further discussion. God bless you. Take care, my friend.
Likewise. Wish you the best. Yeah, all the best.
A very humble guy, man. Very sincere. May Allah guide him.
He is.
SubhanAllah.
How did you know he was vegan?
How did I know he's vegan? Because the way he was going about to say that, hey, like everybody's a murderer. So that's vegan. That's vegan ideology.
Very good, mashallah.
Barakallah feek, akhi. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala increase us all. Oh, I'm still recording. I gotta.